Welcome to my talk. My name is Belén Ozarín. I am a PhD student at the University of Burgos. I'm also working for Isabel, the first university. The title of my talk is Social Vulnerability of First and Second Generation Migrant Women, based on the interaction between social class, gender, and ethnicity. These variables are studied in the works by Katharina Edwards, the book Finding Rosa, a non-fictional book, and the film by Sergio Navarrete, Looking for Angelina. The objectives are to to study the generational differences between these two female protagonists. They will be explored, highlighting the unique challenges each of these women have to face in their respective era. The first, Katharina Edwards, is the daughter of an Italian migrant to Canada, but she is Canadian. And the second one is Angelina, who is has to suffer the First World War. She is born in the year 1896, so she is first generation, while Katharina Edwards is second generation migrant women. The analysis will delve into the distinct issues of adaptation, identity, and cultural preservation that define their experiences, as well as the varying societal expectation placed upon them. Some attention will be given to the tools and strategies each protagonist employs to navigate her circumstances, whether through resilience, negotiation of cultural values, or adaptation to evolving social norms. By contrasting their approaches, we gain insight into the shifting dynamics of migration and the evolving role of women across generations. First of all, I would like to talk about the plots. Finding Rosa, Rosa is the mother of Katharina Edwards. She suffers from Alzheimer's. So Edwards travels to Istria, now part of Croatia, the hometown of her mother, to get the truth of her mother's past and try to get knowledge or try to understand about their bad relationship. She discovers the suppressed history of Istria and the ethnic cleansing of her mother's people, and uncovers Rosa's personal losses, her family exile, her father's mysterious death, and the roots of her own sense of never belonging. Katharina is caught in that ever-growing sandwich generation of women who have to take care for their own children and their ailing parents, in this case her mother. So Edwards balances the demands of raising teenage daughters, the pressure of dealing with a deteriorating mother, and during these 4 years Edwards cares for her mother. She must also deal with her mother's confusion, hostility, paranoia, and fear, as well as her own physical and emotional exhaustion. Through this journey, she braves an idea of darkness for her mother, and finally comes to know who really her mother was. When it comes to Looking for Angelina, the film, it is directed by Sergio Navarrete, based on true events, on the life of Angelina Napolitano, an immigrant who in 1911 killed her abusive husband, Italian husband. So this film explores the themes of justice, women's rights, and the fight against domestic violence. This migrant woman became really famous. She was a referent for feminists at the time. She has to fight against the death sentence, and finally she was in prison for 10 years. Well, also we have to make a comparison with the variables of gender and migrant women. This gender issue for migrant women is really complex because it encompasses multiple dimensions. That is why we are going to study the transcultural variables by Paul Jay. In this case, the double vulnerability, the violence of and human trafficking, precarious condition works, barriers to health and justice access, impact on the family, the caregiver role, and the resilience and collective organization. When it comes regarding the social class and migrant women, it is also rather complicated, but we have some variables to take into consideration. For example, the pre-migration socioeconomic background, the labor market segmentation, the legal and social protection, intersectionality, remittances on social mobility, and resistance and activism. And finally, dealing with ethnicity, we have the intersection of gender, ethnicity, and migration, creating unique challenges of opportunities for women of different racial and ethnic backgrounds. The racial and ethnic discrimination, segregation, social integration and cultural barriers, gender-based discrimination, ethnic biases, and migration policies, and empowerment and resistance. In our study, we want to I am going to try to take the differences between the first and second generation migrant women and the variables that are more common in the novel and the book. But the main differences between these migrant women stem from various factors. And just to sum them up, we have here the migration experience, cultural identity, social and economic roles, language and communication, gender roles and expectations, community involvement, views of assimilation, and challenges faces. When it comes to the first one, these women migrated to Canada primarily after the First and Second World War. Many came as part of a large wave of European immigrants seeking better economic opportunities. And for many, the journey to Canada was often marked by hardship, language barriers, and a strong connection to their Italian roots. They typically settle in close-knit ethnic communities. Regarding the second generation, they were born in Canada to Italian immigrants' parents or arrived at a young age. In this case, Caterina arrived to Canada when she was 8 years old. They grew up in Canada and in the Canadian society, often speaking both Italian and English. Their experiences were shaped more by Canadian culture, although many still retain strong connections to Italian heritage through family traditions, language, and cultural practices. Regarding cultural identity, for the first generation, these women face a dual identity struggle because they maintain strong ties to their Italian roots, but had to navigate and adapt to Canadian society. Many of them face cultural isolation, especially if they were not fluent in English or French, the Canadian official languages. In the second generation, these women were more Canadian in identity, but still held on their Italian heritage, so they feel the gap in between, not feeling sometimes a sense of belonging to neither of both societies. They typically spoke both Italian and English and were more integrated into mainstream Canadian culture. They could easily navigate both cultures, but they experienced less isolation than their mothers or grandmothers. Regarding the economic and social roles for the first generation, Italian women initially work in low-paying manual labor jobs such as factories, agriculture, domestic work, as both cases, Angelina and Caterina's mother Rosa, center around family and maintaining traditional Italian values of home and caregiving, and they were also instrumental in building ethnic clubs and maintaining community connections. The second one, growing in Canada, they have more access to the education and professional opportunities. So Rosa's daughter Caterina is a writer and she goes to university. The first generation, as we said before, they are not proficient in English, tend not to be proficient, but they do in the second generation. Regarding the first generation gender roles, women were traditional, influenced by a patriarchal structure and Italian society. They were dedicated to domestic roles, while for the second generation, they are less influenced by these traditional roles, and they pursue education and career paths. The first generation play a central role in establishing Italian-Canadian communities, churches, community organizations, while in the second generation they were more engaged with broader Canadian society, participating in mainstream cultural and social activities. The first generation lived in tight-knit communities that preserve Italian customs, traditions, and language, and the second one integrated into Canadian identity alongside their Italian roots. They maintain the pride of their Italian heritage. The first generation had to challenge and this had to adjust to the new language, culture, and lifestyle, and they had to maintain their traditional values, while the second generation they had to face challenges related to balancing two cultural identities. They had to deal with stereotypes or expectations from the Italian communities. These variables are analyzed by the transcultural theories by Dagnino and Jay. These variables are mainly transcultural variables are history, migrant, mobility, and women. I would like to say that the intersection of women, of gender, migration, and justice in second generations migrant have more tools to address gender inequalities, but they carry traditional cultural expectations. First generations migrants face multiple vulnerabilities that aggravate their oppression and can lead to extreme situations such as lethal violence in self-defense as the first case. In both cases, gender plays a determining role in their access to opportunities, justice, and autonomy. It is important to mention that the intersection of gender, migration, that in both cases they have the same tools, but they're completely different. For the first generation in the film, the woman has to struggle with the justice, but with in the second one, it is more to do with the struggle in the domestic lifestyle. Well, that's all. Thanks a lot for listening.